Welcome to today's webinar, Innovative Problem Solving, Enhancing Your Value in the Workplace, presented by Tony Perkins. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. My training would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this live webinar from the lands of the Jagera people. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today, and especially those joining this webinar. Hi everyone, I'm Stacey Wallace, General Manager of My Training. My Training is a future-focused RTL, OTO, helping you to become your best self at work through leadership and management, mental health, and neurodiversity training. Our training has a satisfaction score of 4.8 out of 5 stars. This year alone, we've trained more than 700 people in mental health first aid, and have delivered more than 25 corporate workshops, with many more booked in until Christmas. If you'd like this training, please visit the My Training website or phone us on 1300 549 190. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tony Perkins. Tony is a HR consultant, providing practical leadership and human resources advice to businesses through his consultancy, People Smarts. With a background in executive management and human resource management spanning over 20 years, Tony has worked in a diverse range of industries, helping businesses grow through their people. Tony, I can see you've arrived. Thank you so much. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you and to kick off your webinar today.
Well, thank you very much, Stacey. Much appreciated for that introduction, and welcome to everybody. Today we're actually doing a little bit of a presentation on innovative problem solving and looking at the ways you can enhance your value in the workplace. Now, what are you going to gain from today's session? Well, today's session, we're going to start looking at a structured approach to solving problems. We're going to introduce a model to you, which is called the SOLVE model. We're going to look at simple brainstorming techniques you can use individually or in teams to help you work your way through the problems you may identify. And we're particularly going to start looking at identifying root causes of issues so that you can come up with lasting solutions in regards to the problems that may arise in the workplace. Now, one of the things that we should do right from the start is actually talk about what a problem actually is. Now, basically, the definition that we have is the process of identifying a challenge and finding an effective solution. And largely, if we look at this approach, we end up having a traditional way of addressing it. And the traditional way of addressing it is often linear. It focuses on fixing symptoms, and it doesn't really address the root cause. And that's why we've got to start looking at some innovative ways to problem solve, because it means that we use creativity and strategic thinking to generate new ideas. And new ideas enable us to implement solutions that are sustainable and forward-thinking. And a question for you, how many, and obviously you can't answer right at the moment, but how many of you have actually gone through, someone's come to you and said, we've got a problem, you've put a solution in place, only for 3 or 4 weeks later or a couple of days later, guess what happens? The problem comes up again. And that's because you haven't got down to the root cause. So what we actually try and do is actually really embrace the different ways that we can actually look at diverse perspectives. We look at how we can challenge conventional thinking, and we focus really on root cause analysis. And we try and actually ensure that our solutions have a lasting impact. So if we actually look at problem solving in the workplace, it actually has a real impact. It boosts efficiency. You cannot, the more you actually have to revisit something because you keep having the problem reoccurring, means that you spend more time on it. And more time costs you money, costs you effort, and costs you productivity. So we end up boosting efficiency by actually using effective problem solving skills. We actually start thinking about new and different ways to do things. So we encourage people to think creatively and lead them to groundbreaking ideas and solutions which you may not have thought of in the first place. We take every problem that arises as something that enables us to actually grow individually and as a business. If we use the right approach, we can enhance collaboration. We can actually start creating a culture where teamwork is the norm and shared ownership of challenges and successes. We need people to actually start thinking about how they start dealing with problems. Not just coming to the boss and saying we've got a problem and expecting a solution. We need them to be starting to think about their solutions before they even come and talk to the boss. We need to build their confidence to do that, because if we don't build their confidence to do that, what ends up happening is they end up coming back into the loop of coming back and asking their leader what it is needs to be done. So we want to equip them with the skills to handle complex challenges, and we want to increase their value to the organisation. And by doing that, we actually create a growing organisation which actually has the ability to learn as it's moving ahead. So, and finally, we actually are able to demonstrate proactive thinking. We're not reactive to problems. We're actually proactive in our resolution of them, so that we actually solve the problems. We actually start thinking strategically ahead rather than behind. And we start making our team and ourselves into valuable assets for our business. Now, today, I'm going to use a case study to actually build through and work through the problem-solving process. And the reason I'm using a case study is very, very simple. It's real world. It has relevance. It helps illustrate how problem-solving techniques apply to actual workplace challenges. It engages learning. Stories and examples make the concepts easier to understand. So when you're actually sitting there looking at it, you can see what I'm talking about in the real world. Okay? You can see how it could be applied to your business. And it provides you with a step-by-step demonstration of the practical use of what we're going to call the SOLVE model, which I'll introduce to you very shortly, in a real-world context. And it helps you to identify the problem and moves you through to implementing solutions. And then we're able to highlight the impact in the particular case study that we're going to use today, demonstrating how that is tangible in terms of effective problem solving and emphasizing the value of addressing the root cause rather than the symptoms. Now, our case study today, before I go on to it, I am going to use a case study, a simple case study from one of our clients. It is a case study which actually involves a human resource issue, but the systems and the processes and the flow that I use today is able to be used in many different problems, in many different solutions. So if you're looking for to solving a technical problem, if you're looking to solve a business problem of any sort, you can still use the same process as we move through today. It is just that today I'm using a case study with a specific focus in HR. Okay, the case study we're going to use today is that one of our clients faced a significant challenge, and it's all too common in many organisations. They had very high employee turnover. And if you can imagine hiring new talent, and many of you might be in this position, and you're investing time and resources into their training, and you only see them leave within a few months, and you're sitting back and you're wondering why. Now, what ends up happening? Well, what ends up happening is people end up saying, the impact's severe. It's affecting team stability, it's increasing costs, and it's demoralising existing staff. And what do? They blame the recruitment process, they blame the people they're selecting, they blame everything else, but they don't actually sit down and actually work out what the root cause of this problem actually was. And this was happening in our client here. And what was basically happening was that they had a very high turnover, particularly in their sales team, and it continued on for many, many years. So we introduced to them a problem-solving model, and the problem-solving model was the SOLVE model. Okay, so let me actually just go through a little bit of information about the SOLVE model for you. The first thing is, it's a structured approach to problem solving. It helps individuals to actually address challenges effectively. And as I said to you earlier, it is something that can be used in all types of problems, with all types of problems, and creating all sorts of solutions. Okay, it is a model which actually enables you to actually use a number of different tools, and I'll explain that as we move through. It has 5 easy to understand steps, and it breaks down the problem-solving process and ensures the problems are resolved at their root cause, not at a symptoms level, but a root cause. You imagine going to the doctor. What does the doctor do? The doctor actually sends you off for tests to actually start ascertaining what the root cause of your illness is. And then they treat the root cause. If they treat the symptoms, well, you may feel better for a little while, but it could come back again a bit later. And that is the same thing that can be happening in your business when you actually start problem solving at the symptomatic level. So we end up with practical and long-lasting solutions. They implement, and you end up with solutions that are practical and long-lasting. So it actually works really well. Now, the steps of the solve model. The first one is we specify the problem. We look to define the problem clearly. We identify who is affected and why it's important. For example, with our case study, we needed to specify the turnover rate and work out why. Okay. We then brainstormed a range of different solutions, and we use techniques like mind mapping and so on. For example, we use structured, in our case study, we use structured onboarding and mentorships. We then start listing the pros and cons and evaluating the benefits and drawbacks, and we verify the chosen solution. Finally, like any good loop, we actually start looking at evaluating the outcome. Now, what does this mean? It means that we have a model which is flexible. Okay, it's applicable to both individual and group problem-solving techniques, and it's adaptable for various challenges. It's really action-orientated. It focuses on creating practical implementable solutions, and it includes a clear path for execution. In other words, we're actually moving through from this is the problem, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to fix it. And let's see if this worked and what can we do better next time. When we start looking at, as I said earlier, we start getting clarity and focus. We help teams zero in on the real issue. So we start avoiding wasting time on irrelevant issues. We often see in problem-solving conversations people going off on tangents. If we can actually drill down to the root cause of a problem, we end up focusing on the root cause and not irrelevant details. We're encouraging people to explore multiple solutions, so we're actually looking to foster innovation and enhancing creativity. And we end up with improved outcomes, ensuring solutions are well thought out, and there's a less likelihood of recurring problems. It works really well. So now what I'd like to do is, if I can, is I'd just like to break down the solve into a little bit more detail. And we're going to start with the S, the specifying the problem. Okay, and in this section, we virtually clearly define the problem to ensure everyone understands what needs to be addressed. We want to ask ourselves, what is exactly the issue, who is affected, and why is it important to solve this problem? And to do that, what do? Well, we dig. We find the root cause for your problem. Okay. As I've said a couple of times already today, solving it at its surface level may only lead to temporary relief. We want to ensure a lasting solution. So it's critical that we actually understand and address the underlying cause of the issue. Now, we can use a number of different tools here. There are root cause analysis models coming. If you do a search on Google, you'll probably find about 100 different models. I've got some of them up here. We've got things like the fishbone up on the top left-hand side there. We've got the PROACT performance model. We've got Pareto diagrams. We've got process flow diagrams. We've got flow charts. All these are effective tools which you could use in terms of the root cause. And depending on the situation, you might choose any one of these to actually help you along. And today, I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging down into the root cause analysis models or the different models, because frankly, we don't have enough time. When we actually look at problem solving, we could spend a whole day talking about the different ways of analysing root cause. We can talk about the different ways of actually coming up with different techniques to actually solve our problem. What we need to be doing today is actually focusing on the framework that we can use to really solve our issues and create lasting solutions. So today I'm going to introduce you to one very easy tool that is actually being put together by a gentleman by the name of Toyota in the 1920s. And as part of his lean manufacturing principles, he put together what he calls was the 5 ways principle for digging deeper into problems. It's simple, it's powerful, and it actually identifies the root cause. It's used extensively at Toyota to ensure issues are resolved and not just temporarily fixed. And we all know what sort of reputation Toyota has in terms of quality and quantity in terms of their product. So how does it work? Well, it works by asking why. We start with the problem. We ask, why did this happen? And then we continue asking why. We dig deeper and we ask why up to 5 times. And we stop when the root cause is identified. So let me give you an example. Okay. When we actually start looking at, say, you're going to print something in your office. You go to your computer, you bring up the document you want printed, and you hit print. You then find out that the printer's not working. So what do? You go to the printer and you look at the printer and the printer's run out of toner. Now, the simple solution is we just replace the toner. However, you go down, you get the toner out of the cupboard or wherever it's actually stored, and you find there's no toner there. So the printer's not working because there's no toner. There's no toner, but why is there no toner? Okay, is it because someone didn't order it? Why didn't anyone order it? Well, maybe no one was responsible for it, and so on. We keep asking the questions until we find out what the root cause of that problem is. That printer is the printer example is a simple solution where we can actually drill down. And we've actually seen that at use in one of our clients where they actually use the printer as the Y tool to actually solve the printer solution. Once again, it's simple, but what it ended up being was that no one was actually responsible for actually ordering the toner, and no one had thought about actually making someone responsible for it. They identified the root cause, they actually made someone responsible for it, and they fixed it. It's a simple solution to a simple problem. But the 5 whys can be used in so many different ways. Okay, so if we actually have a look at the 5 whys in our case study, we asked why are employees leaving within 3 months. The answer that came back from the team when we actually asked that question was they feel unsupported and overwhelmed. And when we asked why they feel unsupported, there's no structured onboarding process. Why was there no structured onboarding process? Because the company had always relied on learning on the job. Why has learning on the job been the approach? Because management assumed it was efficient. And why did management assume this? Because there was no awareness of the impact it had on the employee experience. We were actually able to drill down into that and actually look at the different ways this can actually impact their business and why it might have been causing the problem they're having. And in the end, the root cause was clear: the absence of a structured onboarding process. So we then moved on to the next part of the program, and that was the O of solve. We outlined the possible solutions. Now we're here. The best thing to actually start doing is start using brainstorming techniques. And once again, we have so many different types of brainstorming techniques that we can use in business. You select the one that's actually best for you, okay? And then you actually move through and you actually look at the one that's going to work and start implementing in your business. As you can see here, there's a number of different ones that can be done. In Microsoft Teams, in the top left-hand corner, there's a whole tool in there, which is actually enables a number of tools in there on their whiteboard, which actually enables you to do online brainstorming or online use of different tools to actually do some brainstorming techniques. There is you can do a SWOT analysis, you can use the business model canvas, you can use all sorts of things. You use the best tool for the situation you've got at hand. So what did we do with our client and their situation? Well, we went to mind mapping. Okay, we looked for different visual ways to organize their ideas, and we centered it around the main problem or concept. As you can see here, this is a video which is actually taken from stock. This was a very similar process that we used with them. We used a whiteboard. We put a big circle in the middle and had each of them come up and start drawing branches off the central point. And we ended up actually doing a mind map, which actually really drilled down into different things they could do as a solution to the process. So let's just take this through a step-by-step process. The first thing we do to create a mind map is we write down the central problem or the challenge in the middle of a blank page. We can use a digital tool. Microsoft Visio, Microsoft Teams has a tool in there as well. We can use all sorts of things like that to actually enable us to actually do some mind mapping. There are different tools there that actually enable us to do it. Or the simplest one is you go and get a great big piece of paper, you stick it up on the wall, and guess what you've got? You've got the start of a mind map. We don't have to get too complicated into it. We just got to concentrate on the issue at hand. We then draw off the branches, and the branches go outward from the central problem. Each branch represents a category or a major idea related to the problem. And then we expand on them. We bring them out until we can actually look at the different ways that we can do things. So for example, when we actually started looking at our client, we ended up branching out from looking at the different ways that we could do things, including mentoring and stuff like that. And we ended up with different aims, different things that we can do as part of the mentoring program. And what we ended up with was our ability to actually apply things to our case study. And what we ended up with was a whole range of different things that could be done to actually improve the ability of our client to retain people within the first 3 months. As you can see there, the main point is the high employee turnover, but then we moved along. Okay, we started talking about a structured onboarding program, and we knew that we needed training materials. We knew that we needed welcome sessions, 30-day check-ins, and 30 and 60, 90-day development plans. And these actually turned out to be pivotal in the process of actually getting things going, because we actually started the expectations really early. We then looked at mentorship programs, and once again, we could come up with 2 or 3 things sitting off that. We looked at different ways we can support them during their initial things, and we can actually look at the different ways we get feedback from them as we move through. So as you can see, we actually went through a whole lot of different things to actually come up with different solutions to actually move forward. Now, were all these solutions implemented? No, not necessarily, but it was part of the brainstorming process to actually get in there and actually find as many solutions as we could so that we can evaluate those solutions. And how did we evaluate those solutions? Well, we moved on to the L in the solve. And the L is list pros and cons. In this area here, we're trying to evaluate each possible solution by weighing its benefits and drawbacks. And our goal is to make an informed decision that balances the impact with the feasibility and resources. It's all very well saying when we actually go and pick a solution that we're going to do this solution, but if we can't afford it or we don't have the resources, what's the point? We're just going to fail. We need to actually keep these things in mind. So how do we do this? Well, first off, we identify the options by reviewing the potential solutions brainstorm in the previous step. We then list the pros, consider advantages like cost effectiveness, speed of implementation, and so on. We list the cons, the drawbacks, and then we prioritize the solution. And we use this analysis to rank options and choose the one that best addresses the problem. So until this point, what we've done is identified the root cause. We've come up with different ways that we can actually solve this. And now we're putting in place pros and cons to actually decide which is the best solution for us. Now with our case study, okay, we actually started looking at the pros and cons of a structured onboarding program. And we saw that there was a whole range of pros, but there were some cons as well. We saw that, the pros reduced new hire stress. They increased the retention rates. And we could go down the list there until we get to reduce turnover costs. But what were the cons? Well, we had to be careful. We didn't want to overwhelm the new hires and create another situation of increased turnover. We wanted to actually make sure that they had the resources and the team was set up and trained. And we knew it was going to be time consuming and there might be resistance from people already in the organisation. So we went through and we actually listed the pros and cons so that when we actually identified which solution we were going to go with, we had a pretty good idea about what was going to be our problems and what were going to be our positives coming out from the program. So some practical tips when actually starting to look at the pros and cons. The first one is be objective. Base your pros and cons on data and facts, not opinions. Okay. If someone says that's not going to work, it's closing down an argument. It's not an argument in itself. Okay. The data and the facts will show you where things are. Okay. Consider the long-term impact. Don't just think about immediate results. Turning around and saying, no, we can't afford that right at this very moment, actually shuts down the solution when you might have a longer-term impact. And the longer-term impact may save you money in the long run. And look, if you need to, rank your pros and cons with a simple scoring system to prioritize the solutions. Okay. It's up to you and the situation and where the solution you're trying to solve, the problem you're trying to solve, to actually pick the right matrix. But simply actually ranking the pros and cons actually gives you a fairly good idea about where things are at. So now that we've got our pros and cons, we need to actually start looking at verifying the solutions. And this is the V, okay? And during this section, we try to ensure the selected solution is practical, well-planned, and ready for implementation. We want to create a clear, actionable plan that outlines responsibilities, deadlines, and measures of success. In other words, we want to set ourselves up so that we actually know, one, what the solution is, how we're going to implement it, when we're going to implement it, and how do we know it's going to be successful. So, once again, some of our normal leadership actions come into here. What do? We actually define clear objectives. What's success look like? Be specific about the desired outcome. Create an action plan. Outline the steps needed to implement the solution. You need timelines, key milestones, and so on. And when we actually stop and look at it, we need to make sure the resources are in place and we know how to measure it. And then we do a quick risk assessment and establish a backup plan for any potential obstacles. And remember, once again, we have a process here in the SOLVE model where we can bring in and out different tools, okay? We can start using SMART goals, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-driven. We can use the GROW model, the GROW model, which actually looks at our goal, our reality, our options and obstacles, and our way forward. We can use a different model depending on which way we need to go in terms of the problem itself. Okay, and our risk assessment gives us the ability to identify things that actually might get in our way so that we can plan around them to start with. So when we actually start looking at our case study, well, what did we try and do? Well, our objective was to reduce employee turnover by 50% within the first 3 months. Okay. Our action plan was develop onboarding materials in 2 weeks, train our mentors, and schedule weekly check-ins with new hires. And what we were actually looking to do was track turnover rates and gather feedback from your employees to measure success. Now, it's very simple to talk about this in very simple terms. But the process we've just been through with our case study actually took about 1.5 to 2 months to actually go through. Why? Because we also had to bring people on board from time to time to actually get input and gather information. And the more information we gathered, the stronger our response was. But then we've done the implementation and we want to get things moving, and we're now going to move to evaluating the outcome. And this is important because we want to make sure everything is effectively addressed. And we want to understand what worked and didn't work. We want to be a growing organisation. We want to be an organisation which learns from our experiences. We want to be able to actually take something that's worked, and we want to actually take something that didn't work, and we want to learn from them so that we can do better again next time. It doesn't matter how much we improve, whether it's a little bit or a lot. Each step is a step towards getting better and better every day. So our aim is to learn from the outcome to improve future problem-solving efforts and ensure continuous improvement. So how can you evaluate the solution? Well, once again, that whole thing about you pick the tool that's right for you, okay? There could be different ways that you actually go through and actually do this. And I'll talk about some of the tools that you can use in a moment. But we want to measure success by comparing results against initial objectives, okay? And basically, we're asking ourselves, did we set out what we achieved to do? We want to collect feedback. We want to gather information from all the people involved. That includes team members. And don't forget your customers, okay? Don't forget your customers, your clients, because they're the ones who are the end product, and they're the ones who are using the end product, and they are the ones who actually are the reason for your being there, okay? We want to analyze results, and we want to identify patterns and insights. What were the strengths and the weaknesses of our approach? And then we want to record our findings so people learn from it, and it informs our future problem solving, and we share them with your team. And I think this last step is something that's often missed. How many times have you actually sat down with someone and they've gone, oh, we dealt with that 3 or 4 years ago and I can't remember what we did? Okay, well, we've had this problem before, but yeah, I can't remember. Okay, it's common. It's something that happens. But if we can find a way to gather that knowledge and keep that information within our organisation, we once again have another tool to actually look at for when we have new problems. All right. So what are some of the tools you can use for evaluating success? Well, the number one tool that we often use is surveys and questionnaires. Yes, in the situation that we were talking about at the moment, where with our case study, we did use surveys and questionnaires, and we used it to gauge the satisfaction and effectiveness of the new people who are coming through into the organisation, and of those who are already within it, in terms of how they thought people were actually starting to become embedded in the organisation. We use metrics and performance indicators to quantify the impact of the solution. We did team meetings to actually discuss what worked and what didn't. And we actually did SWOT analysis on the solution's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, a lot of people consider SWOT as being a purely marketing tool. I need to tell you right here, right now, that you can use it to evaluate many different things, okay? And the more you actually begin to use it, the more common it gets used in your organisation, because it will help you to identify things that you can actually really, really utilise to make things better again. So let's talk about our case study in terms of the evaluation. Well, the company reduced its employee turnover by 40% in 3 months, okay? Didn't quite make the 50, but we actually got on the road. The new hires reported feeling better supported, and mentors provided valuable insights for further improvements. The structured onboarding program was effective. It was very effective, but minor adjustments like pacing the training sessions could have improved the outcomes further. So what we ended up with was a growing process, a process that was learning, and an organisation that was actually starting to bring people up to speed a lot quicker, improving productivity and improving their turnover rates. Okay. Now, this case study that we're actually talking about here actually started probably about 18 months ago. That turnover at the moment, particularly in their sales team, has actually reduced down to about 10% over a 12-month period. So we've actually seen some real impact by actually taking a real root cause analysis solution and moving it through the organisation. The actual impact on the organisation actually went right through the organisation and not just with new hires. All right, what I'd like to do now is just talk about some key takeaways from today. First thing is, I would strongly recommend you use the SOLVE model. It's a practical framework for tackling complex problems. It's effective and it's efficient. Getting to the root cause is absolutely essential when you actually wish to lead to sustainable solutions. It's very easy to throw a Band-Aid on something and it's working today and everything's good. But when you actually get on to the next day and the next day and the next day, and it keeps on happening again, it's costing you time, it's costing you effort, and it's pissing people off, just to put it mildly, okay? Simple brainstorming techniques work. We often start thinking too complicated in terms of the tools we're going to use or how we're going to do things and stuff like that. We often think that meetings have to be, really structured and stuff like that. But when you actually look at a brainstorming technique like mind mapping, it is throwing a piece of paper up on the wall or writing on the whiteboard. It's people throwing ideas and solutions and throwing them up on the board. You can use different things with brainstorming, like you can use post-it notes, okay? And people can write on post-it notes and throw things up on the board. You can then actually start looking at the different ways that you can actually allocate them to different areas. Weigh your options carefully. Actually going through and evaluating your pros and cons ensures that you make informed decisions. Informed decisions are actually ones that actually create sustainable outcomes. Guesses do not create sustainable outcomes. They create the answer to the guess, okay? And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for you. We often say in management that you can't manage something unless you can measure it. Well, you can't actually work out how impactful your solution has been unless you actually have a way to measure it. So make sure you plan and you have clear metrics to help verify and evaluate your impact. It comes down to, in the end, to continuous improvement. When we start learning from the outcome, whether it's successful or not, we become a better problem solver. And when our organisations adapt this continuous improvement process and actually start looking at problems as opportunities, we end up with the ability to actually create a growing organisation. And a growing organisation is one that keeps on being successful. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I've moved through the presentation in about 40 minutes. Hopefully, some of you may have some questions. If not, I'll hand it back over to Stacey.
Thank you, Tony. That was fantastic. I loved that you did two things. You told us about the SOLVE model, which is an effective framework for solving problems, but you also used a case study. And a lot of our subscribers and people who follow our webinars are actually HR practitioners, so I'm sure that they found that really useful. I'd like to invite our audience now to submit their questions via the Q&A box if you have any that you would like to ask Tony, and then I will ask Tony on your behalf. In the meantime, Tony, I do have a few questions for you that I'm really curious about. I've absolutely really loved your model and your presentation today, and it's too often that we get lured into solving problems in the moment and absolutely kind of not doing it from the root cause. And so my question is, what is your advice or any tips you can give people to resist the temptation to solve the problem from a superficial lens? And I think this is the big question that we all face in a day-to-day operations of our roles.
I think one of the first answers I usually give to a question like that is time. One of the biggest things we have is that you can almost guarantee that when someone's going to turn up to talk to you about a problem, you're going to be time poor. There's going to be something else happening, and you want to get back to that something else. And the simple fact of the matter is that you immediately try and provide the quickest and easiest solution. Now, what is the impact of that? Well, the impact of that is, first, you solve the problem superficially. Second impact is that you do not give the person who's asking the question the opportunity to solve the problem themselves. So they end up becoming, and this is the third impact, they end up becoming reliant on you to solve their problems. And when you start solving their problems, what do they keep doing? They keep coming back. You're not giving them the opportunity to think. You're not giving them the opportunity to grow, and they're just using you as the simple answer to their problems. So my solution is often to actually say create time. And what I mean by that is ask questions. Go back to them and say, okay, what would you like to do? How would you like to solve this? What would you like to do? All right. And if you do need to create yourself time in terms of fixing something else, you say to them, well, okay, look, how about you go off and actually have a think about that? I'll be with you in 5 minutes. Okay. So in other words, giving them time to think. Okay. We need to actually start looking at the different ways that we can actually start getting feedback. And often when we actually provide solutions, we tell them what to do. Well, we can actually start using different methods to actually work this through. For example, we can use things like the SBI model, where we talk about situation, behaviour and impact when we're doing performance management. But what I'm talking about here is we use a similar model to actually say, okay, so this is the situation. What is it we want to actually achieve? What behaviour do we want to achieve from this piece of equipment or this person or this thing? And what is the impact if we actually get it right? So in other words, we actually start establishing the goal right at the start. And once we've established that goal, we can then start a conversation and start asking questions about how we can solve it. A similar model that can be used is the GROW model, which actually looks at, okay, what's our goal? The reality here is it's not working. Okay, what are our options? Okay, let's select a way forward. So we can use different models to actually do that through. But I think the basic answer to your question is that we often do things because it's the easiest solution. And sometimes we have to take the time to take the longer solution to actually solve the problem in the long term.
Thanks, Tony. I loved your point about creating employee independence rather than kind of codependence, and having to come back and keep sort of getting that solution rather than solving it themselves. I have a question now as kind of the reverse, and you've started to answer it actually. And that is, in business, sometimes problems do have deadlines and we can't stretch it out over 18 months. So what part of this process would you take to apply to those problems where we do have, a month to solve or 2 weeks to solve? I'm not talking about the ones that we have to solve on the spot, but ones where we have to be quicker in our approach. What's your advice there, if anything, if you want to elaborate on what you said?
Yep, I have two approaches to that one. The first one is that you can still use elements of the solve model to actually move it through. For example, you can get down to the root cause and find
Mm,
what the root cause is, so you can address the root cause.
mm.
The second one is that you can look at you know just a quick stand-up meeting to actually do some bits about it in the solution. Once you actually have that root cause, you can start the conversation with people around, okay, this is what we've got to achieve now. How are we going to do it? Okay. And then you can implement and use a bit of an evolving process where you test things out, see how well they work and adapt it over as you move forward. My longer term approach to that is that when you do that, you make sure in some way, shape or fashion, you update your procedure, your process, your documentation in some way, shape or fashion. So if it does happen again, you can learn from what you tried last time. And what that means is that next time this happens, you actually got the ability to actually step back and look at where things were, which helps you resolve things in a quicker manner again.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, to document the changes that you've made to make sure that they're there and visible for all stakeholders and parties. So that's a really good point. And for those that were listening today, Tony's woven in so many different techniques and strategies, and we'll be able to share these PowerPoints with you and also the video so that you can watch it again, because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to digest and take away.
And as I said a little bit earlier, there's so many different models or so many different strategies that you can use in regards to problem solving. You could spend the whole day doing a workshop on this and still not have touched, half of them.
I just think it's been so good today to have that reminder that to follow a structured process is going to lead to positive outcomes. You did say about the feedback from the clients and the participants, but what did your clients say to you, Tony, like as the consultant of People Smart? What was the conversations at the end of this in terms of the dramatic impact you had on their business?
Yeah, that's really interesting because we've been working with this particular client for quite a while now. So the impacts have sort of like compounded on top of each other in terms of the other work we're doing as well. Largely, what we're seeing is a more stable and more healthier workforce in terms of where things are at. The stability has actually come from a number of different things. One is this particular problem here, but we've also been looking at leadership coaching and a number of other different bits and pieces within the organisation, making sure that their knowledge management is good and making sure they've got the right tools and resources around them. So it's a bit hard to actually quantify in terms of this particular program. What we can see from the numbers, the turnover figures, and so on, is that they're spending less time on recruiting. They're spending more time on professional development and improving their focus on the customer, which is having a greater impact on the bottom line as well. So there's a number of different ways that we can look at this particular situation.
Yeah, it's great that there was lots of flow-on effects and that you're going in and helping them with multiple problems as well. Okay, as there's no questions from our audience today, I'm going to start wrapping us up. So thank you everyone for your attendance. It's been wonderful to have you here with us today. As I mentioned earlier, you will get access to the webinar recording and the slides. I want to let you know that you can also access My Training's previous webinars on our YouTube page. You just need to Google YouTube and My Training and then just select our videos. Okay, just checking our Q&A. As there are no further questions, I will now conclude today's webinar. On behalf of My Training, I would like to take the time to thank Tony for presenting today's session. We'd like to thank you for being live today as well. This presentation and webinar today actually concludes our 2024 webinar series. Stay tuned for the 2025 series, which we will be releasing to the public very soon. I'd like to thank you, Tony, for your great presentation, your model, and your engagement in my questions towards the end. And thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
I know.